Now, I've said time and time again, I'm not an expert in anything, although I do have some experience in the small form factor computing niche. But what little knowledge I do have, I want to share with other aspiring Scratch builders. In the past, I've made modding videos and work logs hoping to inspire like-minded people to roll up their sleeves and make something even better. But I always get comments from people who feel limited by a lack of resources at their disposal, tools, workspace, or time to learn a craft. Inspired to bring Scratch building to more people, I started work on the O5L. The Skyreach O5L, O standing for open source, is just about the simplest sheet metal case design there is for a DIY project. It uses what's now referred to as the console layout, so nothing special there. But what is special is the 3D printed parts, which allow for this case to securely hold expansion cards, but be made without any special forms or dies. If you've ever attempted a Scratch case, you know that the hard part is how to arrange and provide mounting provisions in the rear. The O5L solves this problem, and I hope that it helps boost the emerging do-it-yourself Scratch building scene. The footage you're watching comes from my 3-part livestream, where I built this computer in Fusion 360 from scratch. So if you're interested in watching it, check out the links in the description. Before we get too far, it's important to understand the O5L isn't limited to just one layout. The case mechanisms remain the same, even as you expand or shrink the chassis. I've been using it to develop many layouts, some that are truly unique, and I've been sharing them on my Patreon for quite a while now, so you can pop open the files and remix them to craft your perfect case design. Once you have your design, it can be easily made with simple hand tools, like a jigsaw. If you have a hobbyist CNC router, you could use that to cut the panels too. But there is a truly magical tool that requires no investment in time or equipment, and that is a cutting service like SendCutSend. You can upload the O5L files directly to SendCutSend, and with a few clicks, have a sheet metal flat sent your way ASAP. They even do bending now, and with the optimization of the O5L, you can get a custom chassis in bare metal for far less than some of the other boutique cases out there, including the ones that I manufacture. In fact, SendCutSend is priced so well, it's actually cheaper for me to have them cut 2D flats out and ship them to me than it is for me to buy metal online for a project and then cut the parts out myself. I do have an electromagnetic brake, so I bend my parts to save some money. I say save. If I had known about SendCutSend a year earlier, I wouldn't have electromagnetic brake in my shop, but if you do have access to a vise or metal brake, I have a little hint for you. In my CAD software, I put 2 little 1mm diameter holes centered on either side of my bend line. The result are 2 tiny guide marks on the metal that I can use quickly to line up my part in my brake. No need for me to grab a ruler and draw bend lines on my part. This saves me a ton of time and gives me very accurate bends. SendCutSend doesn't do everything, at least not yet, so a little elbow grease such as tapping and threading the holes is still required. However, this takes a minimum investment in tools. A $6 hand tab works fine, and that's what I started with, but now I use an electric driver with a combination drill tap. With the right technique and the proper lube, it makes short work of the O5L's threaded holes. The bare minimum you need to tap is 19, but this model has a few more. Another tip: buy a cheap wire brush and use your lube on it. This way you can clean your tap and lube it in the same operation, which saves time and money. Really, after the sheet metal is finished, you could just throw your parts in it and call it done, but this is a fancy Scratch build for Sapphire, so I'm going to make it unique. For primer, I use SEM products, which come with my Modfather's seal of approval. By the way, if you have a minute, check out Bill Owen's incredible work here. For paint, I use House of Color products and cover it in a Spray Max 2K clear. This paint is quite a bit more expensive than what you can buy in hardware stores, but it produces a beautiful result, even for scrubs like me. But if this is your first time or you're on a budget, don't worry. I've painted plenty of cases with Rust-Oleum, Krylon, and Duplicolor with just fine results. Follow a good guide on YouTube and take your time. For this particular build, I want the GPU to look like it's part of the case, or at least really integrate both together with no gaps. My plan was to craft an acrylic spacer that goes between the fans on the GPU and the side panel of the chassis. One of the cool features about Sapphire NITRO GPUs is they have PCB mounted fans, which are super easy to swap. Sapphire sells an ARGB fan kit, and in theory, the light from them would catch the acrylic spacer and further make the case and the GPU meld together. I didn't have any problems milling this part per se, but I did find out that I had misjudged the thickness. So when I went to install it in the chassis, I realized I needed to make the part over again. To save time, I cut the part in the laser. I went slow and hot with no air assist to get that flame polished edge. Now, usually flame polish is not literal, but some of the residue from the protective paper ignited. Never a dull moment. The thickness of the acrylic mounted on the CNC already was correct for the feet of the chassis, which lifts it up and gives it stability as well as room for the power supply to exhaust. I was having quite a derp night, and I made some mistakes and ended up having to cut 3 sets of feet to get it correct. Like I said before, if I can do it, anyone can. Honestly, it would have been faster to cut them out by hand. After some sanding to give them a frosted look, they were ready to install in the chassis. The backplate side of the beautiful 6700 XT Nitro Plus deserves to be displayed without distraction, so my case window acts as a visual partition. Everything below the GPU will be blackened out and covered by smoke acrylic, with my sky slot pattern for venting. This part was quickly and easily cut in the laser. This time I did not use flame polishing, because with so many cutouts, I didn't want to risk the part warping. I fixed the acrylic window to the chassis cover using double-sided mounting tape, which will give it a screwless look, but also allow the future owner of the chassis to remove it and flip it around in case they want to invert the chassis so the GPU is at the bottom. This way the GPU logos will face up. I'm mounting it this way for the sake of performance, with the GPU being able to vent cleanly upward, which will further repel dust. For several years now, I've been integrating exotic hardwoods into my industrial designs. I love the organic warmth that wood brings to a piece of electronic equipment, and the contrast between natural and synthetic is striking. Again, this part could be easily made with hand tools, but I use the laser, which cuts through walnut like a hot knife through butter. I've used 100% pure tung oil to finish the majority of my wood parts, but I found this incredible product on Etsy which conditions wood and leather. It's cheaper and easier to apply than pure tung oil, and the finish it creates is just, I don't know the words for it, but it is the perfect look for me. The bezel is attached with 2 brass nutserts, which I press into the wood, and further affixed by the giant 25mm stainless steel on-off switch. What a chonker! I love the feel of the actuation, and it goes perfectly with the satin walnut. The last decorative part, and the most expensive, is the carbon fiber trim panel. This $80 sheet of carbon fiber tops off the case and makes it feel quite premium. By the way, I love how structural carbon fiber plate sounds. This part is solely for decorative purposes. It covers the standoff screws of the motherboard, power supply, and GPU brackets. I could have made it out of acrylic or even used a vinyl sticker, but the depth of the material and how it will change color and reflects light is just that little extra spice this build needs. The 6700 XT Nitro Plus is a big honking card. And keeping with my goal of integrating it visually and functionally in the chassis, I designed a brace which clamps the GPU to the acrylic spacer. I sandwiched the GPU between foam on the clamp and at the end of the spacer, and this makes it rock solid. Even more so than a typical ATX chassis, and no dreaded sag. Side note, if you have a sag problem, check out the original machined anti-sag brace from MNPC Tech. I had several power supplies to choose from the shelf, but I went with the Ion 650 Gold from Fractal Design because it has an ideal cable set for small form factor builds. The cable jacket is made from silicon, and it makes the cables extremely flexible. Fractal also makes the cables the perfect size for a build like this. Not too long, not too short. I made the AC extension cable from a right angle cable I bought on Amazon, sleeved it, and it was simple enough to route to a C6 AC inlet. Assembly of the system was complete, but it's not a system until it works, and I did run into some trouble. I broke my #1 rule, which is always test the parts on the test bench before installing to a case. Both the motherboard and the RAM were slightly bad, which made isolating the problem difficult. I had to rip apart the system to prove the problem, which resulted in me changing some parts up. You could use butt connectors by following my tutorial here, but I have a soldering iron, so I use that. Although I had some difficulties, the final system turned out really great, and looks even better in person, where the metallic pearl paint job and the carbon fiber panel can pick up light, sparkle, and shine when you move around the chassis. The ARGB accents of the 6700 XT Nitro Plus add just a bit of flavor to the stealthy vibe of the build. There is just the tiniest amount of ARGB near the motherboard as well, which doesn't give away too much, but does hint at the industrial componentry in the bottom of the case. I love the contrast, and I love how the card looks completely integrated with the case and, at the same time, pops out at the viewer. I think my favorite detail is the acrylic spacer, which draws you into the GPU heatsink which has 3 unique fin arrangements. This is a nice touch by the engineers at Sapphire for both performance and aesthetics. This is how I customize the O5L. You might find it attractive, or you might hate it, but that's what's so cool. You can customize it and make it however you want. I'm so excited to see what other builders do with these files, which you can download using the links in the description. I have many more designs and remixes on my Patreon too, if you're into this kind of stuff. Lots of thank yous to Sapphire and AMD for sponsoring this build. They are giving it away, and I hope that the winner enjoys having it on their desk as much as I enjoyed building it. I want to thank SynCutSyn for giving my viewers 15% off via this discount code, and I want to thank Fractal Design for sending me the exact power supply I needed for this build. Of course, a very special thanks to my patrons on Patreon who help enable me to spend a lot of my time designing new builds for the small form factor community. And last but not least, thank you for watching this video and other videos like it on my channel. I sincerely hope I can provide some useful resources for you on your next project, or at the very least, offer a teeny tiny bit of inspiration. This is just a starting point. I know you can do better, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. Thanks again. Peace.